I ain't gotta maintain my image in person, cause I am the same guy. I ain't walking in your shoes, but I do stand beside him. Another story on the news, talking about how another cop shot him. What's the world really?
Water management systems and like all that stuff. That's how it's handled. And I've never heard anyone be like, you know, what about those folks? Where's the mayor at? Where's the city council? What the hell are they doing?
Where are they at?
You know, they've been on vacation since the 1992, apparently, you know. It's crazy.
It is crazy. But honestly, I think the government in itself is in my business way too much. You were there to defend my borders, and yet you don't care about the borders at all. You're more worried about how many more pennies are left out of my dollar for you to tax. And we got a problem with that. And the congressman, when was the last time a congressman knocked on your door and said, hey, I'm about to go to bat for you on this bill. What do you think about it? They don't do that no more because they moved to Washington the minute they got elected. They don't care about me no more. They haven't cared about me until 2 years from now when they come back for the re-election pins. You know, put this on your yard. And they're entailed the whole problem. They become part of their own little social club and screw the little guy because I'll be reelected because I got a cute dimple and a hot wife. So we got a lot of problems.
No, I absolutely agree. And the border is a great example of how like the stupidity of politics gets in the way of addressing true horrors and evils that are going on. Because there's like, my understanding, the number I heard was 31% of the people who were claiming to be families were not genetically or were genetically related. So 69% of the people that were showing up with kids at the border weren't related to the kids that they were showing up with. And, you know, we have stories of kids being flown around on planes by the government, you know, on all kinds, I mean, dropped off in all kinds of places. And we know under Trump, and this goes before Trump, but under Trump, we knew that there were certain issues with accounting and keeping track of all those children once they got into the country. A lot of them were disappearing or not being kept track of. That hasn't stopped. That didn't magically just get, you know, fixed because Biden's in there. And Biden is a creepy fellow. I'll leave it at that. You know, that's the most generous way I could say it. It makes me sick to my stomach anytime I start thinking about it. On my social media, I posted a while ago, and it was one of the more depressing days I've ever had in my life. I went through and I went and found the 7 or 8 clips of him doing creepy shit on little girls to show people why the fuck I could not vote for this freaking monster. Yeah. Like, you could say all the creepy shit Donald Trump said about his daughter, and I'll agree with you. It's creepy as fuck. Sorry, I'll stop cussing. I know this subject gets it out of me. That's creepy, for sure. But Trump brags about everything he has. So he'd be like, I have the most sexy daughter. She's the best model that's ever been. She's got, look at this. No one has legs like that. Like, that's how he talks. And he's a womanizer. And Trump doesn't pretend to be anything other than what he is.
He's Bruce Wayne, man. He is the embodiment of Bruce Wayne. I got all this money and I'm a playboy. And look at me. You know, I'm all about the glitz and the glamour, not about.
And he was raised in a rich household. So his bank account was there dating with him as a wingman. Like his bank account has been his wingman since day one. And that changes you as a human being. You know, like I believe him and Melania have layers of their relationship that have depth. She speaks 5 languages and he's like a thoughtful guy in all kinds of ways. So they're going to have depth there. And he could have been with any model. She could have been with any rich guy. So there's something to be said for that side of it. But they've also said, Trump has said he wouldn't be with her if she wasn't good looking. And she said, I wouldn't be with him if he wasn't rich. So like that, you know, that's a whole thing. Anyways, I don't know exactly where I was going with all of those comments and points other than Trump is a creep too, but there's layers to this game. There's levels to this game. And Biden takes it to a whole different level.
I wanted Trump back when I was in high school. I wanted Trump and Perot to come run this corporation that we call America. And when he chose Yuzi, who out of Ohio, whatever his name was, I don't know what his background. I don't even know who this guy was. For 4 years, I don't know who this guy was. You know? Penn? Yeah. Honestly, why this guy? You know, I got theories, whatever. I did get to see the Trump that I wanted 30 years ago. I just didn't get to see all of the Trump I wanted 30 years ago, because America's a corporation. It needs to be ran like a corporation. And anyone that says that it shouldn't be, I'm not saying that they don't know what they're talking about, but you have to look at it from a grand scale. There's a lot of money at play. There's a lot of product at play. There's a lot of landscape and corporate. But
and to be fair, to clarify for anyone that watches this, and what we mean when we say that is, when we're talking about the economy, when we're talking about economic decisions, when we're talking about the economic interests of Americans,
yes,
we got to run this place like a business. When it comes to, foreign policy or the transgenders or, whatever it might be, okay, business is maybe not the right word, but when it comes to the economics of it, and that's why, it's funny, the one metric you didn't hear in all the years of Trump was income.
Right.
They talked about GDP. They talked about everything else. They never talked about income. Why? Because we had record levels of income growth, especially for minorities and for blue collar workers during those times. The growth between 2017 and 2019 for median household income for the Black Americans, the growth in that time frame was equivalent, if you took it out to 8 years of Trump, is equivalent to 40 years of Obama, 16 years of Clinton, and Bush Jr. was a disaster. He actually reduced median household income for minorities, so he actually took them backwards. So it's like infinite.
I don't doubt that. I don't
on
doubt
that
that
one. But anywho, and that is the central thing that matters when it comes to delivering for the American people economically. Are you raising our income? And that's the only thing that none of these business shows ever talk about, because none of them actually care about that. And even they'll say, and it's a lie, but they'll say rising wages will create inflation. That's a lie. That's a lie. That's ridiculous to think that.
If so, Texas is so overinflated it ain't even funny, and yet it's balancing very well. I left Texas in 2017, and I miss it every single day because I watch how they run their country, and the numbers aren't falling. Mm-hmm. They're not going anywhere. People are moving there in droves. That's a balloon that I could live with over there because it seems to be self-sustaining.
Yeah, that's called growth. It's not a bubble.
Exactly.
There's a you could say that California is in a bubble because of the amount of business in California that was propped up just because of the enhanced unemployment that came here. Because if you don't have customers that have money, the businesses go out of business, and that was the giant scare. Because the lockdowns here in California. Where are you right now? Out of curiosity.
Georgia.
Okay. Yeah, the lockdowns here in California were severe. Like almost all small businesses that weren't Walmart or whatever shut down. Yeah. Like all of the places shut down, liquor stores for weeks and weeks and weeks. It was crazy. It was really crazy. And so it was like the apocalypse here for a few months.
And I lived in Maine. I lived in Maine during the beginning of this. And I lost my job because I refused to wear a mask. So I got to go home and watch all the businesses in my street shut down for what seemed like an eternity. And then 6 months later, they're like, oh, you can come back to work now. And I'm like, oh, okay. Well, we sold our house when we moved to Georgia. And Georgia, along with Florida, didn't have all these mandates in. They're like, hey, it's your life. Do your thing, boo-boo. And it was like re-emerging into some alternate universe because all the businesses were open and some people had masks and some people didn't. And no one was throwing rocks at each other in Maine. There was literal fights breaking out because somebody didn't have the mask over their nose, So the way of thinking and the way the government handled this is crazy, And I was so thankful to move into Georgia the way I did. Like, I don't know how y'all are still doing lockdowns and stuff and like in Canada and stuff because here we're just living, And I don't know. It's crazy.
It really is.
Back down here.
It really is. Yeah, things are getting back to normal. They're all the blue states are starting to shut all the restrictions down. And
election year.
But yeah, the election year is definitely part of it. But also we're dealing with this whole trucker situation in Canada. And that is sort of like the COVID camps in Australia. Like the rest of the world's looking at it like, oh, dang, what are you guys doing? especially Americans, are like, what the heck? Because they're literally, the government is like tried to have tow trucks confiscate and tow away their trucks to clear the road. Like,
Really?
and the tow truck said, no, we're not going to do that. We work with these trucking companies all the time. We're not going to get in the bad side of the unions or any of those people, any of the associations. So they stood on their side, and a lot of other people stood on their side. But Trudeau's like started bringing in military stuff, and like he's coming down hard because there's I think it's $1 billion of goods that go across that bridge that they're blockading between Detroit and Ottawa, I believe, is where it's at.
I have a decent following. You know, I'm not no big creator by far, but my second biggest following is out of Canada, and I have been getting a lot of home movies or cell phone videos sent to me, a lot of clips, a lot of stuff because they wanted me to understand. And when I watch it versus what I've seen on CNN, it's a whole different side of the coin. They were like, oh, they overtook the soup kitchen, and the clips I'm seeing is they've got these long things of barbecue grills and they're just feeding everybody in the neighborhood. So it's like, I don't know where I stand on that because that ain't my country first. That's not my country. It's not my business. You do your thing, boo-boo. But I think we're tired. We're tired of this whole COVID-19 thing. We're ready to move on. We're ready to look. You can't keep a boot on my neck like this and expect me to keep smiling. We're ready to move on.
Yeah. And honestly, like after it's kind of funny actually how it's all come about, because here's what I would say. In the beginning, we all had to lock down 2 weeks to slow the spread. I was all for it because we didn't know what we were dealing with. And then around, June and July, the data started to come in and we knew old people, fat people, you guys are vulnerable. The rest of you guys are doing a lot better, it seems. So Florida and a bunch of other places opened up, and other places didn't. But at that stage, I agree with that. I think outside of the vulnerable classes, and we should have invested heavily in protecting those groups instead of what happened in New York and a few other places, what they did to the old folks there. That's its own thing. But we and then everyone else should have just been allowed to go do what they were going to do. And then when Delta started to surge in 2021, I actually would have advocated for another partial lockdown, not quite as severe or as all-encompassing, but there was a surge that definitely should have been handled, and there was nothing. There was no response. There was no real pressure. There was no, nothing. Because the establishment got back in, their boy was in office, and so there's no point in riling up and making everyone scared and terrified when you have power. But once your power was challenged, and I want to move past Trump. I think his policies and the good sides of him need to be noted and learned from, because he did a lot of good. But I do think it's best for America to just move on past Trump and try to look to DeSantis 2024 with as the great brown hope, but the great tanned hope. I really like his approach during the pandemic and his sort of views on things. And Florida is an interesting state. Miami specifically, the mayor of Miami is super into crypto and started integrating some of the local government things and allowing them to accept crypto as payment and things like that. Started really like being a progressive in a certain sense when it comes to that. So I'm really excited to see, what comes out of purple America, because a lot of people look at DeSantis as a Republican, not as a purple American that happens to be a Republican, which is kind of, and the last few governors and the senators in Florida there, I know are a few of them have been Republican. So it's not like, they aren't Republican in a certain sense, but anywho.
I like DeSantis. I hope he runs. I don't think he will in 2024. But I mean, unless he said something lately, but I would love to see him. He's a wild card, and he's about people and choice.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. I said, I was talking to someone yesterday and I said, or we were talking about the difference between him and Trump had guts, which you need, and that's much better than corruption. That's by definition going to be better than corruption. And Trump did make decisions according to what he thought was best for the American people. Whether you agree with him or not,
Right.
Saudi Arabian arms deal is good for the economy of America. Like, that's a fact. And so if you want to make the argument over those merits, you know, that's why he made that decision and a bunch of other decisions. But you need not only guts, but you need sophistication on top of that. And Trump definitely lacked that. He was a blunt instrument.
Comes from, though. I mean, look at when Trump was elected. How long did it? You know what? That first year, how many of his cabinet members were actually vetted by the Congress at that point? Not many.
Mm-hmm.
And that was like letting loose a pit bull in a neighborhood with no leash. And you're like, why is he tearing up the neighborhood? Because there's no one there to control the leash. That's what the cabinet does. It reins him in, and it's like, hey, dude, check yourself a little bit. And he had nobody. And boy, he broke open that executive book, didn't he? He was just, and there was no one there to check him. And that was where the mistake came from. But
yeah, he
feel like I've been in a new mind state lately, but still in the same route. Always looking for a move, let's get to the money, see what we can bang out.